Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our live stream with George Sephton, the Voice of Anfield. So, I've got two people here on the call. First and foremost, we've got Mr. Marc Kenny, another co host of KopConnect Radio, and the man that we're all here to see. Hello, George. How's it going today?
Very good today, thank you. A reasonably quiet day. Just looking forward to this tonight.
Fantastic. So, what's it like in Liverpool at the minute? That was just playing. So, what's it been like in Liverpool at the minute?
Um, out in the sticks, it's very quiet. It's very strange that it's like permanent Christmas Day when you go out driving down to the shop and the roads are so quiet. And obviously, I'm lucky that I'm most of what I have to do nowadays involves sitting at this desk in front of this laptop. So I'm spoiled, I think, at the moment, and I quite like being locked away just here, me and my wife and the dog. It's quite tranquil.
Fantastic. Well, we're glad to hear that you're getting a little bit of rest, mate. Because I know we're going to be diving into your career, and I know it's been an ongoing career for many years, not only at
Yes.
Anfield, but I'd like to kind of talk to you, if I may, about before life before Anfield, as we're going to get to the Liverpool section of your life in a little bit. But life before Anfield, I mean, where was it you grew up, George?
Not far from where I am now, not far from Walton Hospital in Liverpool. Um, Nowadays we live by Aintree Racecourse, which I think everybody knows. But I was brought up around the Walton area, and since then I've sort of circulated around the area. We had a flat in Prince's Park when we were married, which is 51 years ago, and then we moved out right into the sticks out in Lancashire, worked our way back to where we are now, which is it was we've been here 23 years. It's a nice new house at the time, and it was very handy for where I was working before I retired. And obviously, it's about 15 minutes from Anfield. My sat nav says it's 8 minutes from here to Anfield. But I'm not quite sure what the sat nav was driving when it worked that out, because it wasn't my car. I can tell you that for nothing. But yeah, so as I say, I grew up around here, not really not moved far away, but which is good because obviously I'm a baby boomer, so I grew up in the Beatles era. We had two of the Beatles at my school, um, which was something I wish I'd been aware of at the time. If I'd only kept well in with those two. But I used to go downstairs when I was 12, 13 at school. The rule was if it was raining, instead of staying outside in the schoolyard, you got a book. I went and sat in a big hall and looked interested. My mate and I used to slope off down to the basement to watch these big lads practicing chords on guitars. And so one was called George Harrison, another one was called Paul McCartney. To know last few years of his life, which was sad because when I first met up with him, when his autobiography came out, it was very strange calling him Peter because when I was at school, he was head boy, and if he came in the room, you stood to attention and looked very wary. But it was a great place to be, and obviously it's a great place to be now. Paul McCartney bought the school. Now it's now called the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, and we have my generation have got a good relationship with the people who run it now, Marc and his crew, and obviously apart from the last 12 months, we spend quite a bit of time in there. We can go in and use the bar. We have little reunions and big reunions. We have reunion dinners up at Anfield and that sort of thing. I've been really lucky. My timing was great because obviously when I was just taking an interest in music in the early 50s, rock and roll came on the scene, and then later on I think it was 1962 we first got a PA system at Anfield, which I presume was because we just moved up to the top division, and the FA said you must have one of these, and that coincided with Merseybeat, and for a few years in the 60s, this place was the centre of the universe in not just football terms, but music as well, and everybody was was seemed to be focusing on Liverpool. You had guys going around all the church halls and little coffee bars, signing up bands and taking them away. And my mate and I had an old transit van. We ran a band around. I think was the only one that didn't get picked up by the record producers, which was sad because they were actually quite good. But the story of my life. Although we did for a while run around a band called Ricky Gleason and the Top Spots, and they were the business. They were the top band in Liverpool at the time. There was an old newspaper I used to be going for hundreds of thousands of pounds on eBay, which was the Merseybeat newspaper. The big headline: Beatles take over top spot from Ricky Gleason, and in the annual poll, the Beatles had suddenly come from nowhere and moved over Ricky Gleason, and that was the end of his fame. He did make a couple of records, and I think they were mostly issued in the States, not in England. No, Ricky Gleason. I see Ricky. His real name's Dennis, incidentally. I see him around and about now, but we had a running joke in the mid-60s because he was on TV advertising milk, of all things. He was doing a little thing for the Milk Marketing Board, and I was doing adverts for polo mints at the same time. So we'd see each other in the street, and we'd make sort of milk drinking signs and polo eating signs across the road. But, I say it did neither of us any good in the end, I don't think.
Well, George,
So-
going back to the 60s and the Merseybeat, of all the places in the world to be in that period of the 1960s, it was in Liverpool because often a lot of the Liverpool bands are all overlooked because of what the Beatles went on to achieve. But what a special time that must have been in Liverpool.
It was a hotbed of talent. As I say, I was helping run the local youth club at one stage, and I remember one Christmas. I'm not sure what I could work out what year it was, but we had a look in the kitty. We had £8 in the kitty, so we got the Undertaker, who were probably they were in the top 4 or 5 bands at the time. I remember somebody saying to me, "It's a pity we've only got £8. If we had 10, we would have got the Beatles." And that's the way the place was. I mean, the Beatles played at the Aintree Institute, which was a social club not far from where I live now. Been knocked down. It's our local vet now, strange to relate. But they all over the city there were church halls, coffee bars, clubs, and if you got round there, the talent on view was amazing. And it was, I say, it was a hotbed. And there were so many bands. I reckon there were 300 sort of regular, long-standing bands in the city then, and it was just great to be around, and the whole place was just a joy to be in.
I mean, I think, there's so many times where I've been told, growing up in the city of Liverpool, and it was my generations above me, had told me all about the Merseybeat era, and there's so many times where I wish I could have been around during that. But definitely growing up as a Liverpool fan, I'd been in the city for so many different highs and lows and big atmosphere moments or atmospheric moments. And George, mate, you've played a massive part in those moments for us. So if I may, it's time to dive into your career at Anfield. So we've got the first question from Reddit. This is the Ask Me Anything. So what we're talking about this is from KopConnect Radio over to Reddit now. The first one is from Double Deckers. So he says, "Hi George, what is the most you've ever felt Anfield shake?"
Um, my first response was to say the Barcelona game in 2019 because that was the first time I've actually felt the building shake. Where I sit in the corner of the Kop and the Kenny Dalglish stand, quite often you'll have sort of thunderous noise from people behind stamping their feet. But that night, I genuinely thought my room was going to end up down on the concrete below. It's frightening. But thinking back, the noise when Scotland played a World Cup warm-up match at Anfield in the it's been in the 80s, that the noise that night was horrendous. From early on, the whole place, the whole town was full of guys in kilts who'd had too much to drink. And by the time kickoff came, it was the sort of noise that makes your ears bleed. It really was. Um, Anfield, as far as Liverpool matches are concerned, obviously, um, that Barcelona game was the absolute pinnacle of anything. The the atmosphere, the the way it all went on the night, it just had to be the noisiest game, certainly in the last 30 or 40 years. Liverpool is the Anfield has always been a noisy place, and the you know in and that's understating it, but that was the absolute peak. It was just unbelievable to be there. And I keep saying to people over and over again, if you've not actually been inside Anfield for a big game, you have no idea what the sound levels are like or what the atmosphere is like. You've got to feel it, not just see it.
Well, we'll all be back there soon, hopefully, George. It's been too
Hopefully.
long without our famous cop choir, but we'll be back there soon. So that came in from Double Deckers. So the next question, if we can get that one up, this one is from Elmo26, and it's hi George, thanks for your part in making Anfield the special place we all know it to be. Which manager surprised you the most during your time behind the mic?
That's a strange question. I've been trying to think, and I realise probably it's not what you'd expect. It was probably Roy Hodgson, because when he came, in the circumstances we were in, he obviously was a very experienced manager, and I thought he could quite well work wonders with the talent we had at his disposal. But of course, in the end, it all just felt so flat from the word go. Poor Roy, lovely bloke, but he just wasn't a Liverpool manager, and that was a real letdown. I've said to a lot of people lately, the biggest letdown in my career was probably Mario Balotelli. When he came, I was absolutely on cloud nine, and it all fell very flat and a half with him. I really don't know what happened, but the same as far as Roy was concerned. That's the way it went. Roy Hodgson, I thought, would do a job at Liverpool, and he just didn't.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it never came to pass. Huh? I mean, he had the team, he had the squad. It was an interesting one, and then slowly, kind of afterwards, we won't bring up any further about Mario Balotelli. So we'll move right along to
No,
the next
I
question,
wouldn't.
if that's okay, George.
Yeah.
So this is coming in from Fez the Pez. What a great name! Have you ever
I
had a
love it.
blunder? Have you ever had a blunder when announcing a name or a goal? And if so, what was it? And did anyone really notice?
Can I answer the second part of the question first? If I make a mistake, everybody notices, and everybody makes their time to tell me all about it afterwards. I think the biggest blunder really was um, one night in the end of 2000. That was when I started announcing goals. Before that, we just didn't at Anfield. It was club policy not to. And Bill Shankly used to say that if you needed to be told who'd scored the goal, you shouldn't be inside Anfield. Well, that's debatable. But that night, Michael Owen scored two goals in the first half. and it was just coming up to half time. I reached under my desk to get the CD out, ready for half time. Almighty roar, and I looked down, and there's Michael Owen celebrating with Nick Barmby, and I was looking at their faces. I got it into my head that Nick Barmby had scored the goal, and he hadn't. It was Michael Owen. But I announced Nick Barmby as the scorer, and I've recently had the chance to apologise to Michael Owen for taking a hat trick off him. But I was left with egg on my chin and a red face that night. It was awful. But as I say, I can't get away with anything. If I make a bloomer, my inbox will be full by the time I get home.
Well, he certainly knew where the goal was, Mickey Owen, didn't he? He's
Absolutely.
incredible strike rate. And someone else as well that ties in with this next question. Another great name as well, Mane Dingo. So this one's from Mane Dingo. Has there ever been a time you struggled getting the words out, be it something emotional or too hard to prevent yourself from laughing?
Honestly, really, and I can't recall it ever happening. I don't know why, but I have this. I appear to have the gift of sounding professional at all times. Apart from, I think when we beat Olympiacos on the way to Istanbul in 2005, I've seen a video recently. I went hysterical when Steven Gerrard scored the goal that kept us in the competition. But I'll say it's the old thing about the swan, isn't it? Looking serene across the water, while underneath the water his legs are pedaling like crazy. Well, that's probably me when I got something serious to announce. It's I sound cool, calm, and collected. People say I've got a boring voice, but other people say it's soothing. I'll stick to the soothing, but I'm not very cool, calm, and collected underneath, especially when there's a big game going on and things are happening that I don't like. Um, but no, I've never had to choke so far. I might do yet, but not in the past 50 years.
Well, George, there was a moment when Aldo roared. I think it was the Trent goal, wasn't it? When he roared during
Yes.
commentary. I believe you'd done it when Gerrard scored. Was it the
Yes.
Olympiacos game?
Absolutely the same thing. It just every match, especially the big ones. I get to Anfield thinking, right, it's only another game. Calm down. It's only United. It's only Everton. It's only the European Cup semi-final. And about 5 minutes in, I'm going crazy, banging my head on the window of my room or thumping the desk or whatever. But as I say, that that Olympiacos Gerrard goal was something else, and just because of the way it went, the situation um, we were going into the European Cup final, or heading that way for the first time for years and years, and we were on the way out to the Greek side, and all of a sudden Stevie struck right
That
out the blue.
thunderous strike. No, it's true. I mean, would you
rocket.
say we've got the next question here from Robert1811, and this might tie in, or it might not, unless you've got a challenger for it. He says, "Hey George, what's the loudest roar of the Anfield crowds after a goal, or the loudest bit of atmosphere that you've ever heard within the stadium?"
I had to think about that. I mean, it probably was that fourth goal against Barcelona, because it was just surreal what was happening in front of our eyes, and there was a bit of a delay because I know, speaking for myself, when I saw the ball go in the net, I didn't react for half a minute because I thought the referee was going to blow the whistle and say, "Take that again." And so the roar actually you built, but again, the roar at the end of that game, when that final whistle went, after it seemed like about 4 hours between the fourth goal and the final whistle. But when that went off, the place erupted. Nobody went, or very few people went home. They just had to stay, and I banged on "You'll Never Walk Alone," and the atmosphere was great. And, I mean, you look back to Saint Etienne in '77. That was a noise when we got through that. Chelsea in 2005, fantastic, but Barcelona just knocked them all into a cocked hat. If anything ever surpasses that, I'll be very pleased to be there.
Yeah, I mean, some special nights for sure, some deafening nights, and it's been something that's been phenomenal. To be fair, I mean, I think this next question that's coming in, 87X. So this is alluding to times gone by when we had the old standing cop. So George, as someone who's seen the best of both Anfields, what's your opinion on safe standing now? And do you think that we have the right tools to manage it properly now, or is it best left untouched as it is now?
This
A
is
little bit of
very
a
tricky.
two-parter.
Yeah, this is very tricky because, um, objectively speaking, safe standing, from what I've seen of it around Europe and uh, people who tried it in England, looks brilliant. But as a matter of principle, I think back to the time when Anfield was made all-seater and why it was made all-seater, and that was because of Hillsborough. And my attitude is very straightforward. If and when the Hillsborough families are happy for safe standing to come in, I'll be happy as well. But at the moment, you can't look them in the eye and say everything that was changed because of what happened to your loved ones is going to be unchanged. I just couldn't do it. But again, that'll come with time. I think that one of the Hillsborough families group said to me a while ago, it wasn't actually the standing that caused the damage at Hillsborough. It was the management of the people who were standing, and that's true. And when you think about that, if it's you can guarantee it's going to be properly managed, well, so be it. Personally, I did my time on the cop. I did 10 or 11 years, getting pushed and shoved and battered and pulled and all over the place. Um, I couldn't do it now, and I look down from my room, which is just above the cop, and I see people standing. A lot of them do stand, and I always say, "Well, you've just paid, I don't know, 50 quid for a seat. Why aren't you using it?" But then, again, I'm just an old grouch. So the answer is I don't know. I'm sure it'll happen one day, but not for a long time.
I mean, I think what's really interesting about it, George, is for me, what I obviously safety there. Let's not even go there for right now. What I'd love
Yeah,
to dive into with you is you being a member of the COP, and there's so many kind of special memories of like the old boys pen and the stories that I've even
yeah,
heard. Luckily I've been going the game with my granddad, and then it was my great granddad before me. So even as a kid, but we were always in the main stand. I remember I had one experience in the COP, and I felt like as a kid, a corner had happened and I got lifted up, and then I'd just get
yeah,
transported over towards the corner flag, and all of a sudden I'd find my way back to that standing barrier.
yeah.
What was it like back in the day in the COP?
It
Tell us all about that.
it was amazing. You had to be very careful. My mate and I used to get there early on a Saturday afternoon when it was always 3 o'clock on the Saturday afternoon in those days. Slap bang in the centre of the cop with our backs to the crush barrier. That was great. The scheme went wrong a few times when I had to go straight from work or whatever. And I used to work for the TSB. I worked in the bank in Penny Lane, strange to relate, for a while. But we were working on a Saturday, and if we were a bit slow getting out when we'd closed at lunchtime, I'd get out to Anfield late, and I wouldn't get my usual space. I'd get behind a crush barrier, and it was murder. You'd come home, you'd feel like you'd run a marathon by the time you got home. You really would. It was hard work, but again, the atmosphere in the place, the camaraderie is the best word I can come up with to think about. It was just an amazing thing. The COP. Remember, it used to hold 28,000 people, and I remember once or twice your away supporters got. I remember. Uh, I don't know why it sticks in my mind particularly. We were playing Aston Villa in the cup, and um, two Aston Villa fans ended up standing next to me in the middle of the cup, and they were being pushed and pulled and battered all over the place. They were dripping in sweat. Their legs had gone. They were exhausted. And one of them turned to me. I said, it was like a giant sardine can. And this guy turned to me and said, "Is it always like this?" And I said, "No, no, some weeks it gets quite crowded in here." And he just went pale. um, I think he decided he was never going to come to Anfield again unless he could get a nice seat in the stand. But it was hard work. But I say the atmosphere, the atmosphere. Obviously, it was full of comedians and the guys who invented football songs in the middle of it, and they were amazing just to listen to. Listen, some of the instant jokes that came out of there, you'd wonder how on earth it happened. It seemed like 20 odd thousand guys all thought of the same punchline at the same time, and they were wonderful, absolutely wonderful. As I say, I know I couldn't do it now. I really couldn't. I'd end my days in the middle of the cop if I tried standing up there now.
So it was your days in the middle of the cop. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd love to know this story from you, George. It was your days in the middle of the cop when you kind of were first hearing, you mentioned a little earlier the tannoy system that got put in, and hearing that and the songs that were getting sung. I mean, was that something that then kind of sparked the beginning of your career? And is this something that we can read in your book?
Oh yes, available now. Well, no, available in May in all good bookshops. Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because before that period of time, playing music to a crowd before a football match just didn't happen. I know before the tannoy was installed, we all you had was a sort of collective sing-along. To be quite honest, once in a while, the club would treat us to bring in a pipe band to march up and down before the game, and that, But I know they didn't. They petered out for several reasons. People got it into their heads they were bad luck for some reason. We always seemed to lose when they turned up, or we didn't have a good day when they were there. But then, as I say, everything fell together. The Liverpool going up to the top division, the Beatles arriving, the Merseybeat scene, and this PA system, and obviously the guy who started it. There was the guy who You Never Walk Alone on for the first time, and by the time I got there, 10 years later, I just took over the system as it was, which was music pre-match and during half-time, and nobody thought it was strange. It probably seemed strange at the time, but it was great just to be part of the magic that was Liverpool in the 60s.
Yeah, well, this absolutely ties in perfectly to the next question, because we're talking about your 50 years and your book, My 50 Years at Anfield, from Dancer the Drummer, another great name. Hi, George, Congrats on the 50 years of service to the club. Over them 50 years, how have the crowds changed, or is there anything that you notice crowds do more? Is the atmosphere just as intense as it was all those years back?
Thank you for the congratulations. Yes, what I've realised over the last couple of years, the atmosphere is as good as it ever was, but it gets going very quickly. When I started working there, if there's a big game on, there'd be a queue round the block to get in. What, 3 hours before kickoff, maybe more. I know they used to have to have people ready, sort of 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, ready for a 3 o'clock kickoff. And if we were playing United or Everton, or later on when we were playing Leeds, who were our big rivals, obviously, for a while, the gates would open very quickly, very early, and more than once I've slumped back into my seat at 3 o'clock, exhausted because we've had an awful lot of noise for 2.5, 3 hours. Nowadays, obviously, people turn up to Anfield. In their pocket, they've got a piece of paper which says, you're going to get in. This is where you're going to sit. You don't have to worry about fighting your way in. And you've got all these lounges and food outlets. Take your time, in you go. And sort of 20 minutes before kickoff, leading up to team time, and then you never walk alone or whatever, the place is quite often half empty and very, well, not very quiet, but certainly not as noisy as it's going to get. And then not long after kickoff, you suddenly realise the wall of sound is out there, especially if Liverpool score early on, for instance, or it needs something. It maybe it needs a bad foul against one of our players to get the crowd riled, but the atmosphere is definitely as good as it ever was, but it's just not for as long, basically, and it'll happen during the game instead of 2 hours before the game. I know years ago the noise used to intimidate, the opposing players when they were warming up beforehand, but nowadays it's the people watching the warm-ups are probably only filling a third of the stadium, if that.
That's really interesting with regard to, the ticket first and foremost. There's a couple of things I'd like to unpack on that, George, if I may. So, you say they've got a piece of paper or a fan card or whatever it is now, and you know exactly where you're sitting. So first and foremost, coming back to even the Kop, but then the rest of Anfield, what was it like kind of paying to get in on the day? And what did that feel like?
Sometimes it was a lottery. I know, you're queuing up round the block to get in. But, you had time to take the whole thing in it. If it wasn't a huge game, when I was a teenager, I'd go and stand outside the players' entrance and just watch the comings and goings and whatever. And obviously they had hot dog stands up and down the roads all around Anfield. What would they call them? Matt's hot dogs or something, and they had hot dogs and hamburgers. But looking back now, you wonder how none of us ever died of food poisoning in the state of the place, because they were so rickety and primitive, I think is a good word for them. But you can smell the atmosphere before you even got near the stand, and then you're queuing up. You're trying to keep your place in the queue. You're standing there, with your money in your hand, hoping that the gate's going to slam before you get there. That's a very sick feeling if you're about 3 or 4 places away from the turnstile, and suddenly it goes clank, and you couldn't get in. That happened to me more than once, and it's a horrible, horrible feeling. But it was part of the game, part of the excitement of the day out, I think.
You're talking fantastic, mate. Within that side, I think what's really great too is then you spread out the wall of sound, and just kind of the intimidation of the of the opposing teams.
Yeah.
Is there ever been moments in time where any of the players have kind of came out to you and said, thanks for playing this song, or thanks for playing something else and getting the crowd going. And then you also mentioned kind of, part of my life, just as a private memory there, you're kind of like the voice of my match day experience, as many of us that have lucky enough to have gone to Anfield. And I know there's many people watching from all over the world, and we hope someday that you'll be able to join us at Anfield and hear George's voice kind of reaming through the tannoy. But what was that like, kind of revving everyone up before the game, and then for the players? Is there a same piece of that? What's the psyche for you to pick songs before a game?
Well, nowadays, certainly that I have little or no contact with the playing squad because of the way the club is now. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's split into what, 3 or 4 sections. There's the playing squad who live up at the training ground now, which has now moved from Melwood to Kirby. There's the admin people, the sales people, PR, everybody who inhabit the big offices in Chapel Street downtown. And then there's the Saturday mob, the casual people, which includes me. Even after all these years, I'm still classed as casual labour. So it's very difficult most of the time to get a feeling for what the players are looking for. But I get more input from the regular fans than from the players. Actually, I'm thinking that the one thing that went against that was this season. I got a message from one of the players' liaison people who's telling me that when Nat Phillips made his debut, he said to him afterwards that me playing his favourite track, which was by a band called the Midland, I think, and he said that really got me going. It was playing while I was warming up. I thought, after all these years, that's probably the most direct response I've had to a bit of music from any of the players. Mostly my job, I think, nowadays is to wind up the crowd, to create an atmosphere. And it's sadly, obviously, that's all died off this year with the behind closed doors games. But before that, we got into a routine. We have to. I was trying not to say pump up the volume. That sounds a bit twee, doesn't it? But I do as time goes on and on towards kickoff. Every year we seem to have a song that the Kop will take to, and it'll get them going. So 20 minutes, 15 minutes before kickoff. The most recent was Thunderstruck by AC/DC. Before that, there was Allay, 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 Three Little Birds, and going back even to 2005, Status Quo rocking all over the world. And they all come from somewhere. Somebody will say, have you heard this? Or I went to such and such a stadium and they played this. And it'll pass it on to me and I'll try it. And if it goes down well, if people join in, for goodness sake, with something, it works a treat. I know, obviously, they don't join in with Thunderstruck, but I feel, the atmosphere growing when that's on because it's your classic tub thumping record. What I'm going to do when we get back, I don't know, but we'll just have to, break us in gently. I think I have a feeling that when the lockdown is over, all the pubs, clubs, theatres, and football grounds will be so euphoric with people so glad to be back to what they think is normal. I think this country is going to be one giant party venue for a while. Mind you, Uncle Boris might spoil all that for us yet, but I'm hopeful that that's the way it's going to go. That it's there's so much we've missed, and I think people are on the verge of getting used to what we've been going through the last 12 months, and it'll feel well. I said that to my daughter yesterday. I'm going to feel very strange when I've got a crowd to talk to. 54,000 people down there, and I'm chatting to them and playing music for them. It's going to take me a while to get back here. Just like, they say the people who got long COVID, they have to start learning to walk again, and that's going to be us. With people are going to be some people will be a bit worried about going in a big crowd, but there'll be a lot of people who'll be going who've not been before. People who were on the verge of getting their first tickets just before lockdown, and everybody's going to be in the same boat. So it's going to be good. But I say um, assuming I'm still there at the start of next season, I don't get the big E when 50 years has come and gone. Um, I'm just going to planning to carry on as I was before and try and get everybody back into the groove. That's good. It's going to be a challenge, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think because our crowd is so good, it's definitely the best in the business, and no argument about that. I think Liverpool has suffered more than any other club from the lack of it. Everybody, a couple of stadiums in the Premier League are so sterile. There's very little atmosphere anyway, so the teams playing there, no names, no pack drill. You probably work out what I'm talking about. They don't know any different when they've got an empty stadium. It's like your business as normal as far as they're concerned. So I say I'm looking forward to getting back in the groove.
As you say, George, unlike the empty ad, the rest of the country is gonna be euphoric when we open back up, and I think we all need a party, and we need George Sephton on the decks picking the tunes, which is exactly what we do on KopConnect Radio, don't we? We've over the last few months we've been previewing your playlist ahead of the games at Anfield, and obviously we've got no fans in the stadium at the moment, so we've been kind of giving people an insight to what you would normally be picking on the match day, and also discussing your song choices and your kind of thought process behind it as well. Now I know obviously because we chatted, your playlist comes from various different places, including local music as well. You give local music a big chance, don't you?
I'll try my very best because obviously, I say going back to what I was saying before about the Beatles at school, that taught me a valuable lesson that you know big rock stars don't suddenly appear from somewhere. The talented bands around, especially around this city, and talented, not just bands, obviously, yourselves included in that. I played your music more than once at Anfield, and I like to give them a chance because I know I've been surprised over the years that some bands I've been the first one to play them and to any sort of big crowd, and they've done well out of it. One or two bands have rung me up and said that there was a record producer in the crowd on Saturday, and he said to somebody, "Who's that?" Found out, and the next thing I know, they're in the recording studio. And of course, I think I was one of the first people to play the Zootons and the Coddle in in front of a big audience, and those guys haven't done too badly out of it. And of course, my triumph, Atomic Kitten, the end of the '90s. That was weird, and I love those girls, but people used to take the mickey out to be something wicked for. But again, local band put together by Andy McCluskey, who was the well, he still is big wheel in rock music, one of the greats of electronic music from the '80s. So I was pleased to give him a chance, and I'll listen to anybody. And my big problem nowadays is that I get so much good stuff sent to me. Once there was a period in the '80s I used to get all sorts of cassette tapes sent to me, and a lot of them were awful. But you'd pick some gems out of them. But nowadays that's the opposite way around. There's very little I get that's not worth broadcasting. I'm struggling to try and squeeze everybody in. I try my best. I really don't want to let anybody down, so I'll try my best to get them out there.
No, perfect, mate. I mean, a bit of Atomic Kitten. I love that. Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about kind of the crowds and obviously what's been going on with COVID and everyone kind of getting our feedback. So this next username is perfect and happily named. So we're going
Right.
here, Arise from the Ashes, and I think that that's
I like it.
fantastic. So George, hi George, if you could watch one game again live, which one would it be?
That's a tricky one. Obviously, Barcelona would be fantastic. Although I don't think my blood pressure is done it, but it'd be nice to watch the Chelsea Champions League semi-final from 2005 over again, knowing the result, because that was probably the most stressful night ever, um, because of the situation. We were on the verge of getting through to Champions League final for the first time for what 20 years, and it was 0-0 from the first leg at Stamford Bridge. Um, we scored a goal I still think would probably not have stood if we'd had VAR, but who cares? Um, but again, knowing the result and watching those last 25, 30 minutes of that game, knowing that you were going to scrape through would be great, because I know towards the end of that game, people say that Chelsea threw everything but the kitchen sink at Liverpool, and I always say the same thing. I swear there was a kitchen sink flying through the air at one stage. But we got through it, and I can still, if I close my eyes now, I can still see Jose's face at the end of that. He was not a happy man. Not that he ever is, but that night in particular was something else. We were through to the final in Istanbul, and that's all that matters.
Well, George, we were talking about watching one game live again. Is there any particular goal that you would love to see in real time again?
Yes, that's a good question. Probably, that Stevie G goal against Olympiacos still comes back. Again, Stephen scored in the equaliser against West Ham in 2006 at the Millennium. Um, were just amazing, and there were once or twice when we used to have all the reserve games. Then I feel there's a young lad called Phil Charnock, who I think is still the youngest player ever to play in Europe for us. He scored a goal you would not believe in a reserve match there. And, of course, there were no cameras there, and it was just a privilege to watch it. It was a rocket, the rocket to end all rockets. Ditto Phil Thompson scored a rocket when he'd not long started playing, because his career took off just after I started working there, and it's been amazing to watch how he's got on through the years. But no, they're all precious goals at Anfield, and again the craziest of all, the corner, the fourth against Barcelona. Again, close my eyes, I can still see Trent putting the ball down, walking away, and suddenly turning around, a wallop, and we're in the Champions League final, and I still don't believe it to this day. I mean, the sad thing was that ball boy, whose name I remember, is Oakley Cannonier. He should have got a Champions League medal as well, because he was on the ball. That lad, no pun intended.
Yeah.
The speed he picked that spare ball up and gave it to Trent was, they could have been practicing that of Melwood. They really could.
Right, well, we're going to move on to the next question then, George. This one, they've all got great names here. I need to rethink mine. This is
Yeah.
Slinky underscore Panther. And it is, hey, George, I assume you get to meet the players. So there's one question. And then, do they ever ask you to say certain things over the loudspeaker? That's another one. And then, what is the oddest thing they've ever asked you to say?
Well, I can kill this question stone dead, I'm afraid, because I just don't get to meet the current crew at all. Going back, to the 80s, 90s, I used to have a lot to do with people like Steve McManaman, Robbie Fowler, Jamie Redknapp, and people like that. I used to see them before the game. We used to have a chat, and that's all died to death now because of what I said earlier about the club being divided into different sections. So that once in a while, I'd get one of the players asking me to play a dedication for one of their relations who had a birthday who was at the ground, that sort of thing. But obviously, it's 20 years since they stopped me doing dedications at half time, so that's all gone the same way. I'm afraid. Very sad, but um, I don't know. Maybe it'll change after the books come out and they've all read what a good bunch of blokes they are in there. They might all be chasing me to do things for them, but it's nothing at the moment. It just doesn't. It's very sad. I don't like it.
Well, we can be your soldiers, mate. You tell us a list of people that this book needs to get in the right hands, and I'll go and play a postman Pat. Not a problem for you, mate.
Too
so
late.
Moving on,
it's all gone.
Yeah, moving on. We've got Miss Sloth Eyes. Yes, Mark, you definitely need to change your name, and now I'm rethinking mine. So Miss Sloth Eyes says, "Hi George, in your opinion, who was the best rival player you have ever seen play at Anfield?"
It's probably got to be Messi. Again, sadly, it would have been nice to see him when it wasn't important for us to beat him. But just watching him in action was an absolute privilege. And again, I've been lucky over the years. I've seen an awful lot of the great player. Johan Cruyff, I saw at Anfield a couple of times. Messi, I think I've seen him 3 times now. And then we have the likes of Roberto Baggio and whatever. You may or may not remember. I think it was 1998. Italy played Wales at Anfield in a World Cup qualifier. I don't quite know why. I think Wales couldn't provide a big enough stadium. And watching those guys that night, and they say Roberto Baggio, some of the great Italian players were still around then, and I was always impressed with Baggio, not just because of his skill on the pitch, but I remember afterwards I was hanging around outside the players' entrance, just watching comings and goings, and the Italians all came out, climbed in their coach, and in front of me there was a barrier with row upon row of Italian fans, and they were all sort of waving autograph books and whatever. Roberto Baggio got back off the coach and we went right down the line of Italian fans and signed everything they put in front of him. Now that was special. He didn't have to do that. Nobody else on the coach moved, but the only other person I've ever seen do that was Kevin Keegan. When he was playing for Southampton, he came to us a couple of times, and he played in a testimonial match in Anfield, and he was stuck in downstairs reception in the big doors there for about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, signing autograph books for people. But no, Lionel Messi, he's a treat to watch. I believe we've got a couple of players coming through the youth ranks in Anfield now who are in the same league. So I'm looking forward to that happening. But the final line on that, I've never seen anybody at Anfield who I'd swap for Kenny under any circumstances.
I'd agree with that. No one that we've seen play anyway. I think the closest I've seen is probably Stevie G. But yeah, they both played in red, obviously. So another great name, 555 Ham. So hi George, thanks for doing this. How do you keep your voice so calm when announcing massive goals? I do remember Gerrard via Olympiacos. Couldn't quite contain that one. Can hear it vividly now. So we kind of touched on that one a little bit earlier, but I guess the main thing to kind of pull out of that question would be, how do you keep so calm? You've got like the perfect voice for radio as well. So is that?
You got that wrong. I've got the perfect voice for television. No, hang on. I've got the perfect face for radio.
Face for radio.
Yeah. Yeah, as I say, I really don't know. Sometimes it's difficult. Um, Over the years, I think I probably just got used to it. I know um, LSC TV did a half-hour interview with me 10 years ago now. And the piece of played a video of that Olympiacos goal, and you can name I was actually having hysterics over the PA system because, um, as I say, we were on our way out of the Champions League, and I was absolutely desperate to get back there because um, going back to 1985, obviously I was at the Heysel, and you know what happened to that? We got banned out of Europe. Um, but when I went to the airport that day, somebody said to my eldest son, who was only, what, 11 at the time, "Oh, are you going with your dad?" And he looked at me and doe-eyed and said, "No." And I really hadn't thought of him going to a big Champions League final at the time. And I was a bit upset because some of his friends had been to Rotterdam to see Everton win the Cup Winners' Cup the previous week. And I felt really guilty. And I looked at him and I said, "Don't worry, this time next year, we get to the Champions League final, we're going." And of course, it didn't happen. We got banned out of Europe. And as it happened, by the time we got back to the Champions League final in 2005, neither he nor I could get a ticket, so we watched it on the TV, which was annoying. And in 2007, we actually went uh, privately to Athens to see the second final against AC Milan. We lost, but it was such a great trip out for father and son. It really didn't matter. Sad, strange as it may seem, but it was such a great uh, trip away. So yeah, I I've got a gift for keeping calm when it needs to be kept calm. I'll lose it once in a while, but not that often.
A gift for keeping calm, except for when you sat there watching the Champions League final, right?
Yes.
So just before we dive on to the next question, I mean, look, thinking back to the Champions League at the minute we're playing, let's talk about Real Madrid. That name's just come out the hat. What are your thoughts on kind of the Real Madrid game now? And do you think that we can do it? Is the miracle of Istanbul ahead of us and not behind us?
Um, I'm quite convinced we're going to win this Champions League. Don't know why. I just when we lost our sixth home game on the road a couple of weeks back, I said to a lot of people, I just have this feeling we're going to turn Leipzig over again, and we'll be through. And we've got a break till the next round, till the quarterfinals. A couple of weeks, and we get through that. There's more time. The more time goes on, the more likely we are to be closer to a full squad. People keep saying, "Oh, Virgil's not coming back this season," but I wonder. I got a funny feeling in the pit of my stomach. I quite often get feelings about games and competitions, and I'm quite often right. Well, what I mustn't do is put money on them. That always kills it off. But I just have a good feeling about this. City are going to win the league, and then a few days later, everybody will have forgotten because we'll be champions of Europe again.
Well, I'll put
That's
money on
yeah.
it for you, George.
Okay, you do that.
Mark, over to you, mate.
Yeah, go on then. Let's go on. Got a couple of more questions, and then I think we're going to open it up to the Reddit group to take a couple of live questions as well, if we've got time. So this is from Distant Forklift. Hi, George. Across your career, has a player ever taken issue with your pronunciation of their name? Many modern commentators and pundits seem to pronounce certain players' names differently, and I'm curious whether any Liverpool players requested a certain pronunciation from you. And thank you for doing this AMA.
My pleasure doing the AMA. The answer to that one is no, because for various reasons, one of my skills has been getting the names right over the years. When I went to school, I did Latin and Spanish and Russian, would you believe? Latin disappeared very quickly, but the Spanish and Russian have given me a good insight into how to pronounce a lot of European names. So I've really not often had much trouble. I always tell the same story. The worst night I had in Anfield was '76. We played a Greek team, and that was in the days when he didn't have a squad. On the night of the game, he got a program with 11 names on it. And that night, the program turned up with 11 Greek names on it. Then they ditched 5 of them. So it was another 5 names, then 5 substitutes. And I struggled through that game. Um, it was, it was awful. But what made me laugh most of all was I could hear the guys in the next room to me in the roof, the old main stand, and they were commentating on the game for hospital patients. And if you listen very carefully, those 2 guys, you'd think that Tommy Smith and Joey Jones were passing the ball backwards and forwards to each other for 90 solid minutes because the Greeks were just not mentioned. So that I felt sympathy for them because the names are horrendous. But as I say, touch wood. Over the years, I seem to have got by with that one. Obviously, some of the East European names have been quite tricky, but I've certainly had nobody come round and slap me around the chops and say, "You get my name right, mate." Not yet, anyway.
Not yet, anyway. I like that phrase. It's all it's the phonetic spelling and the pronunciations, And I think that it's your calm voice, your radio voice, being able to get the rhythm of it through it, right? So this next question, so actually, you know what? This is brilliant. I'm going to flip the order of these 2. So we have, hi, George. Thanks for taking the time to do this. I have 2 questions. Now, these have been voted the number 1 question, essentially, as a group pairing in the group. So what was the most satisfying goal for you to announce?
Luis Garcia against Chelsea in 2005, just to wipe the smile off Jose's face. It was worth all the nervousness and the trauma and the whole shooting match. That was great. Simply not just because it won the game for us, because I still to this day I'm not entirely convinced it went over the line, which made it even more special, really. For the special one.
The ghost goal for the special one.
The ghost goal, yeah.
I mean, that's gone down in folklore, hasn't it, really? Tell us a little bit more about what you truly think. Was it a goal, George?
Sorry, I missed that last bit.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you truly think. Was it a goal, George?
I don't think so. Obviously, my perch is not level with the goal line, but it's not too far from the goal line. And at the time, I really didn't think it had gone in. It was a very strange angle, but again, obviously the linesman clocked it. But as I said earlier, we didn't have VAR to say definitively. Although, having said that, VAR's got a couple of those wrong in the last 18 months or so, including one that involved us. But turned round, put the whistle in his mouth and pointed to the centre circle. End of.
It counted.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. So now this has been voted the number 1 question, and it's something that I've been wondering my entire life, and we've kept everyone waiting for this. What is Operation Anfield exercise? And we've been standing by for years.
Well, yeah, the Operation Anfield is what would happen if there was a catastrophe going on and we needed to empty the stadium. If there was a terrorist bomb threat, a major fire, an explosion in the kitchens, whatever. If we had to operate Operation Anfield, everybody would be out at the stadium in 2 or 3 minutes. Operation Anfield exercise means that we practice without actually moving anybody out of the stadium. When we do that, the stewards who were responsible for opening out gates would get to their gates, stand by, say we're ready, and everybody else involved in the possible evacuation of the stadium would be in the same place. And after a couple of minutes, everybody's in their place. So if they had to do it, they press go and all the gates would open. But obviously, an exercise just means they're practicing without actually letting it end up with people being turfed out of the stadium. There's a little story attached to that. I was at the Grand National the year that the IRA phoned through a bomb threat and the race was abandoned. And my daughter and I were watching the parade ring, and I heard the PA come on, and I heard a voice say, "Commence Operation Aintree." And I said to my daughter, "Come on, let's go." And she looked at me as if I was crackers, because obviously they were just watching the parade of the horses. I said, "No, believe me, out." And of course, that was the same thing. They had a plan to evacuate the place if need be, and in this case, they had to because they'd been told there was a bomb in the race course. They had to get everybody out. So I think I have a little script I have to read after we have one of these exercises, and basically it boils down to, yeah, we just had a practice of this operation so that we know if we genuinely need to evacuate the stadium, we can. It's all for your safety. It's done with our cooperation of the police, but it's run by our stewards, who incidentally, like the team, are the best in the business.
Fantastic. I mean, it has been really interesting. The amount of times that we even say it kind of during a game or standby Operation Anfield exercise. And to be honest, there's even been moments in the game when it's been a terrible game, when it's been a rainy, cold night at Anfield, and it's kind of perked up the crowd a little bit. Would you say?
Yes. It's weird because I don't actually announce it. If you hear that, it's the guy on what we call the Bing Bong mic in match control, which is controlled by Merseyside Police. And every time that happens, we're obliged to practice. I think it's 3 or 4 times a season. I know to be honest, they do extra practices sometimes. If the chief constable happens to be there or a visiting dignitary from the council, they'll have an extra practice. But it's good because I know if anything did happen, which God forbid, they wouldn't hang around. The place would be empty within 2 or 3 minutes in good time to keep people safe.
Incredible, isn't it? Everything that goes on behind the scenes for all the safety. That many thousand people in the stadium. Safety obviously is paramount.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go to a couple of live questions now. They're, I think, as Rob said, they've been upvoted by the Liverpool Reddit community. So that over the past few days, people have been typing comments, and they're the ones that have been upvoted the most. But what I'm going to read out a couple of live questions that have come in while we've been doing this chat with you, George. So the first one is from Polar Bear Jail, and it is it's double barreled. Who was the most underrated LFC player you've seen, and also the most overrated as well?
The first one probably. That's a good question. I've forgotten his name. The Irish right back in Istanbul, who's disappeared from public view ever since.
Finnan. It's a Finnan.
Pardon?
Finnan.
Yes.
Is he left back?
Steve Finnan. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a senior moment then. Yeah, because not a spectacular player, but he just did his job without question, without arguing. He was very straightforward guy. He turned up, he trained, he played what he was told to play, did what he had to do. And I say, he was not in the same sort of PR bracket as the rest of the team. But I know after he left Liverpool, he just took up a different career. I've heard all sorts of stories, and he refused to attend any reunions and whatever because he said, "Well, no, I've left that now," and so it was. But I say I had a lot of time for him because say he did what he was supposed to do and never caused any upsets. As for overrated, oh no, that's probably hard to say. I don't think if you're in the Liverpool team, you must be good enough to play for Liverpool, or therefore you cannot be overrated. But one or two. Well, going back to what I said before about Mario Balotelli, uh, he overrated himself, and there's nobody else did because he thought he was a superstar. He was the Zlatan Ibrahimovic of his day, wasn't he? Because he thought he was God's gift to football, and it turned out he actually wasn't. But going back over the years, there's not been many I've watched or thought, what was all the fuss about? I know one or two have come with great reputation. Glenn Hussein, for instance, who was going to be another Ron Yeats in the making, and never turned out that way. But people come and gone. The ones that don't step up to the plate don't last very long in the team, and they get moved onwards and upwards.
Yeah, I think Balotelli is the only one that would come to my mind in recent years. Anyway, when we were looking at signing him, everyone was saying, "No, don't do it, don't do it," and we were like, "Oh, we're Liverpool. We're going to be able to fix him. He'll play great for us." But as you say, if no one else overrated him, he certainly overrated himself. So we're going to another question that's coming. I'm going to do one more after this. Aprotos12. When did you become a Liverpool fan? And what was the moment or moments that sealed the deal for you?
You don't become a Liverpool fan. Where I come from, you're born a Liverpool fan. It's almost 100 years since my dad had a trial for Liverpool. Our family were red through and through. There was never any doubt. It's like, do you want to breathe oxygen or not? You didn't have any choice in the matter. And so I was always a red. My dad, he stood on the Kop from, let me see, from probably about 1920 till mid-60s when he was arthritic and he just couldn't do it anymore. It was awful because he was a Kopite. He just couldn't hack it anymore standing there. So the answer is forever. Or put another way, 75 years and 2 weeks. I've been a Liverpool fan. There was never any doubt in my mind.
A fan since a fetus. Absolutely, you're born into it, right? Born, not bred. But that's definitely kind of back in the day when it truly was, football was everything and no social media. So I think that this ties this in now to perfectly sum up our final question. This has been phenomenal, George, and I just want to take the time just before I go into this to thank you again very much for your time. This has been the first Ask Me Anything that we're able to help facilitate with Reddit, and a massive shout out to all of the Reddit mods as well. For all of your help kind of getting these, especially these live questions to us. So this is finally from Sensitive Mix 472. Hi, George. I know, great name again. These are brilliant. We're going to have to change your name, George, as well.
Don't they?
Yeah. The old pick and mix for sure. So, Hi, George. What would you say to the younger fans and what advice would you give them? And I think that that's not only the younger generation, but even younger fans globally. We are such a Liverpool family and a global fan base. So what would you say to the younger fans and what advice would you give them?
Well, several things, really. Obviously, the first one is if you can possibly get to Anfield if you've not been, do it because I think I said earlier, one of my mantras nowadays, if you've not been inside Anfield, you have no idea what it's like until you've actually been there during a game and just drunk in the atmosphere. Um, I think the other thing to say is, listen to traditional Liverpool fans. There's a cluster of people on social media nowadays who really don't know what's going on, but there's a whole hardcore of Liverpool fans who've been fans all their lives, certainly all their adult lives, who can tell you the history and explain to you what it really means to be a Liverpool fan. The loyalty, the camaraderie, everything. I know the last few weeks have been some awful stuff on social media. I mean, when we lost our first couple of home games, there were people on social media saying that Jurgen should be sacked and all that sort of nonsense. Liverpool fans don't do that. Liverpool fans, follow the old Shankly mantra. If you can't support us when we lose, then don't bother supporting us when we win, and that's exactly right. And the other thing, as I say, is just keep your eyes open. Just look, take in the history. Get some. There's plenty of good Liverpool history books, a couple of great encyclopedias, and you really should, take all them in and work. You'll realise what it was like years ago when being a Liverpool fan was, the centre of a lot of people's lives. I mean, it's the centre of mine, but the in the old days of the working class supporter, they were, working in factories for God knows how many hours during the week, and then taking part, in the atmosphere at Anfield on a Saturday afternoon was what they lived for, and that's something you've got to learn to appreciate. But the last thing I'd say is just be glad you're a Red, and just take in the experience. Don't miss a minute if you can. If you get to the ground, if you're watching the parades, taking part in the celebrations. And of course, the other thing is you really need to buy my book. But no, seriously, there's some wonderful books about Liverpool floating around. Not the quiz books, but there's a couple of Liverpool encyclopedias, your big thick volumes. There's one of them on a shelf behind me here, but by Scandinavians, Argrimur Baldursson, I think his name is. I never pronounce it right. And look back and just learn what's gone on in the past and learn to appreciate what happened to Liverpool fans at Hillsborough. And don't take any notice of some of the nonsense that comes from outside. Talk to. If your granddad went to Liverpool, go and listen to what he's got to say about it, and again join in the supporters clubs. Do everything you can to be part of this. It's a magic club. I can't imagine supporting anybody else than the Liverpool FC, and if you do, you're lucky.
Be proud that you're a Red. That's truly what I got there from that, mate, for sure. Phenomenal, George. We can't thank you enough. So where is it that we can get your book?
At the moment, if you go on to Amazon and search The Voice of Anfield, it's up there for pre-order at the moment. It's coming out on May the 6th. There's a few people plugging it for me on Twitter and whatever at the moment. I'm looking forward to May the 6th to see how we go on, but it's a view of Liverpool Football Club from a different perspective. I have a unique perspective. I don't actually work for the club full time. I'm just a little bloke on the fringe basically. But some of the good times I've had with Liverpool are worth reading about, and it also, it relates to the music that's been round and about Anfield since I was a lad, and I've been privileged enough to be influenced the music choices for the last 50 years, which is something. I'd said to you before, when I was a teenager, I used to go and hang around outside the players' entrance. And nowadays, I can walk through the door into Anfield, and that still gives me a buzz because I'm still a fan deep down.
You're more than just a bloke on the fringe, George, and for that, mate, thank you very, very much. This has been phenomenal. We could do this for hours, and I love regaling those stories. So to both you and Marc, I'd like to say thank you very much. We look forward to hearing more of you from KopConnect Radio and the different shows and what's next on the playlist, and hopefully even as the book develops, getting to hear you narrate it at some point down the line would be brilliant.
That's on the somewhere in the pipeline. Few people have said to me, if you do an audio book, who's going to do your voice? And I thought, well, let me think. Joe Pasquale springs to mind. Give over.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know Joe Pasquale, he sounds like David Beckham before his voice changed. So we'll leave that there.
David Beckham on helium.
Yeah, that's truly what Joe Pasquale is. So thank you very, very much to each and every one of you watching on both Carragher's, on KopConnect, and then also on This Is Anfield. A huge shout out to Matt Ladson as well and the crew all behind the scenes. One more time, thank you very, very much, George Sephton. Cheers.
My pleasure.
We'll talk to you soon, ladies and gents.
Cheers.